very early on in my teaching career that the best of lesson plans, spending lots of time poring over curriculum and manuals and guidelines, meant absolutely nothing if you came into school the next day and your students weren't buying into what you were selling. I dealt with way too many behavior issues my first year teaching. Students were bored, they were disengaged, and so was I. I didn't really particularly enjoy going to school, and I couldn't expect them to either. So I took a deep breath and I decided to switch things up and to teach from my gut, to step away from the manuals and into the curriculum, to talk to my students, to build relationships, and to do everything I could to provide authentic, meaningful learning experiences for my students. And along the way, I discovered two things. There's two elements that need to exist to have a really successful learning community for me. And the first is student mindset. Students absolutely need to take ownership and be responsible for their role in the learning process. And so one of the very first lessons I teach in September with my grade 2 and 3 students is about brain development. And I explain to them how neurons fire up in their brain when they are faced with new and challenging opportunities, and that mistakes are just an opportunity for them to learn and to work out their brain. And they buy into that. They realize that they are an active role in whether or not they succeed at school. The second thing is that I need to be responsive to student voice. It's up to me to listen to them, to find out what really matters in their lives, and to build curriculum into their interests and their ideas, and use that as a vehicle to deliver lessons. So earlier in the year, I heard about something called challenge-based learning, and I was intrigued. It's a pedagogic approach to education that looks at taking a social issue that's relevant to students and using innovation and technology, community collaboration to try and solve that issue. I thought it sounded like something that would fit with my teaching style, but I wasn't exactly sure what that would look like with my grade 2-3 students. It wasn't long after that we were sitting around reading from our classroom novel, and I had already presented a variety of texts to the students about the issue of global and local poverty, and they always wanted to know, what can we do to help? And it was during one of these conversations that some students spoke up and said, I would like to help our food bank. And not long after that, several students in my class shared their own experiences with using our local food bank and with food insecurity at home, with not having enough to eat. And it was during that conversation that one of my students said he didn't think that there was anything that we could do to help, because he knew that his family lives in poverty. And I saw several of my students nod in agreement. And the room became very silent. It was like time froze. I could feel them all looking at me, waiting to see what my response would be. And I had several things going through my mind. The first was that he was right. I know that his family lives in poverty, and I know that for us to do a bake sale or a car wash or even ask them to bring in cans of food would be asking too much. The second is I saw that this could be an opportunity for me to dive into challenge-based learning with my students. But what really stood out the most in that moment was that I had these young children in front of me that already felt defeated. They already thought that there was nothing that they could do about their circumstance. And I had returned to school 10 years ago as a single mom. I had an 8-month-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-year-old at the time. And my motivation for becoming a teacher was because I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to actually be able to reach out and help a child. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I knew what it felt like to be stuck. When I was 14 years old, I was couch surfing my way across Chatham-Kent. When I was 13, I ran away. I got on a bus and went to a town called Hope, BC, where I camped along the Fraser River for a week before I got hauled back to Ontario. By 15, I was disengaged. I didn't see the value of education. I was struggling to pay my rent, and I dropped out of high school. I didn't think that there was anything that I could do about my own situation, and I didn't want any of my students to feel that way. I wanted to empower them. I wanted them to realize they don't need to be passive bystanders in their own life, that they absolutely could do something. And so I took a deep breath, and I said, of course we can help. And right now I would like to call on two of my grade 3 students, Trinity Walker and Jada Ogle, and they're going to share with you our journey through challenge-based learning. Come on over, Jada. You can come over. There we go. So we moved from our knowledge building circle over at our carpet, and we walked over to the smartboard, and we logged on to the Outreach for Hunger website, and we clicked on the volunteer tab.
The first thing we saw was bulking. We didn't know what that meant, so we thought that we couldn't do that, and we knew that we couldn't pick up donations, and we knew that we couldn't give donations, but we knew that we could put public awareness because of our Twitter feed and clean and stock shelves.
So I contacted Brenda LeClaire, who is the executive director at Outreach for Hunger, and I told her that my students wanted to do something to help. I asked if we could arrange a time to come and visit, and she was more than happy to have us in. So the following week we bundled up and we headed to Outreach for Hunger. And when we got there, Brenda had us in and she showed us around the facility, and a lot of the students were excited because they knew where they were going, and they had their own personal experiences with the food bank that they could relate to.
She showed us a private room where you go in and she talks to you about your problems and finds ways to help. She finds ways to help. Then she'll give you a list and you can pick out your groceries depending on your family size.
So after we had checked out the food bank and gone into the deep freeze in the warehouse, Brenda took us into the kitchen where the students had an opportunity to actually help out.
We thought we couldn't do bulking, but it actually meant taking a bigger amount and putting it into smaller amounts for the people that were coming to the food bank.
So the students were able to bulk tea bags. They took them out of the cases and they put them into Ziploc bags, 12 in a bag. We talked about how many tea bags we had in total. So if you have 10 bags of 12, how many tea bags do you have? And we just tied math into the process as well while we were in the kitchen. It was a great day. The students were excited. Some of our parents were really excited to join us as well, especially those that utilized the food bank because they had a better understanding of why some of the questions were asked of them. And we returned to school, and we had so much information that we wanted to share. We were in the middle of our persuasive writing unit, and we decided to create public service announcements, and you saw one of them just before I came up. And our goal was either to persuade our audience to help out at their local food bank or to educate them about how the food bank worked. So students got into groups and they were working on their storyboards, and I realized very quickly, this was early in the year, that we needed some help with oral communication. That was definitely going to be an issue. And so I contacted a local radio host, Greg Hetherington. I sent him an email and I explained to him what we were doing and that we needed an expert. We needed to pull in some help. And Greg was more than happy to come in and help us. And so I went over the oral language curriculum expectations that I planned to cover, and we had our success criteria done up as well, so he knew exactly where we were heading with the project. And Greg came in and he spoke with my students as well as the grade 8 students.
He told us to speak with expression and loud and clear. He told us not to talk with our finger in our mouth like this or our hand over our mouth.
And as soon as we were done with our scripts, we went ahead and we started to put them into movie format.
We have we used Adobe Voice to create our PSAs.
And so the students went through the process of going through and making sure that their script matched their pictures and their words, and we covered media literacy expectations as well. And then when we were done, we wanted to share them, because doing this work is only valuable if we're actually raising awareness. And so we went on to our Twitter, and I think At that time, we had about 400 followers, and we tweeted them out. And before we did that, we went into our Twitter analytics, and we analyzed the data, which is part of grade 3 math, analyzing a bar graph. And we knew that we have the highest audience engagement on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. And so we very deliberately shared our public service announcements on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And we were pretty excited to see organizations like Canada Food Bank retweet our public service announcements. We also emailed them to Greg. So 20 minutes after that video being published, it was actually played on a local radio station where it received airtime over Christmas as well. So my students now had a very authentic audience, and they could see the value in investing time and effort into creating quality work. I'll skip past that. And we shared our public service announcements with the food bank as well. And Brenda Leclerc was extremely moved by what the students had done. And later on in an interview that she did with the Chatham Daily News, she said something that really stuck with me, which is that we've been trying to create change in a community for so long, and we've been trying to do that with the adults. And really, I mean, these guys are the way it's going to happen. These students are the ones that are going to create that change. We wanted to make sure we actually had an impact and that people weren't just watching our video and retweeting and not gaining anything from it. So the mission we were on was to educate the public, and we decided to use a platform that we were familiar with. We used Google Forms in class to create surveys and to survey our families and our school community, as well as other classrooms through Twitter. So we thought that was a great way to approach this, and we would ask people to complete our survey both before and after watching our public service announcements.
We made our survey questions based on what we learned from the food bank and turned them into survey questions. And some parents took the link and put it on Facebook.
We surveyed over 150 people. Most of them said they would be scared to go to the food bank.
So that was something that alarmed my students. And the reason it alarmed them is because a lot of the people that answered our surveys are people that actually access the food bank services. And they couldn't understand initially why that would be. So we had a lot of conversation about why would somebody be scared to reach out. We all go through rough times. Why would people be scared to go to a food bank? And we determined through classroom conversations and Padlet, which is an online brainstorming tool that we use frequently in class, we decided it was one of two things. Either it was the stigma attached with needing to utilize community services, and that was something that both myself and many of my students knew about and we had experienced, or we thought it could have something to do with the physical space of the Outreach for Hunger waiting room. It's a very large, bare room. And so the students had a plan, and we went ahead and we emailed Brenda Leclerc again.
We asked if we could have a children's area, but she said no because of germs and other people would get sick. So we asked if we could do paintings, and she said yes because they have very bare walls and they are intimidating.
I'm not very artistic. It's not one of my strong points. So I wanted the students to create something that they would really feel a lot of pride in. And I started to do some asking around, and I heard some wonderful things about Smart Studio. And so I contacted Sandy Moon and Leslie Jeffries, and I told them what the students were doing and what their plan was and how they wanted to recreate this space. And they were so excited to jump on board. They loved the idea. And they volunteered to come in and spend 2 afternoons at our school with the students, and they donated all of the supplies that we needed, with the exception of the canvas, which our principal purchased for us.
She let us decide what we wanted to paint on our canvases. I did spaghetti because it would be a challenge. We all have different paintings.
I picked a fruit bowl because it just looked nice.
So the students were extremely proud of their work. I mean, this is their art mark here. Everybody gets an A, as you see. I mean, it's just blows me away. They're phenomenal. And then we contacted Brenda, and we made another date to go over to the food bank and to do our art installation.
We helped measure and hang up the pictures And they looked awesome.
So we tied in some of our measurement unit here. Again, some very authentic learning opportunities. The students had to create a blueprint before we went over, and they had to plan out how the paintings would be hung, and we had to figure out, you know, the measurement of exactly where they would be, and they did an amazing job. I'm extremely proud of them.
She interviewed Diana from the Chatham Daily News. She interviewed me and Jaden. She asked us questions like, why do you want to help the food bank and why do you want to help your community? I said I wanted to help my community because it made me feel good.
I said I want to help my community because when I went there, it made me feel nervous and I didn't want anyone else to feel that way.
So we returned to school, and I thought, okay, maybe this is going to fizzle out now. It was a very student-driven project, but it had also taken on a life of its own. And so one morning our Twitter feed was up, as it usually is when the students come in the morning, and we saw an article that was up that said that due to the rising cost of produce, there was less available fruits and vegetables at food banks. And of course, they wanted to help. So they said, let's grow some plants. And two things you will now know about me is I am not artistic and I don't have a green thumb. So I said, you know, let's not do that. Let's see what else we can do. And they were like, no, Miss Kay, like, we need to grow some food. So I said, okay, of course we need to grow some food. And I also recognized something else at this moment, which was that teaching these students gardening skills, teaching them how to grow their own food, was a skill that they could carry forward with them and that they could use in their own personal lives. So again, I went to our community for help, and our community was there for us. I contacted Joe from River Bell Organic Gardens in Dresden, and I asked Joe if he would be willing to come out and work with us on this project. I talked to him about the science curriculum expectations I hoped to meet. I wanted to cycle back to our soils unit. I wanted to talk about plants and air and water. And Joe was excited, and he said, absolutely, I will come in. And he volunteered and donated everything that we would need for the project except for the soil. And so we had to figure out how we were going to cover the cost of this. And we set up a GoFundMe page. And after 12 hours, I had to shut it down because we really only needed $20 for soil, and we raised $135 from the public. So now we have some money that we can use to take a bus to go out to the farm later on in the school year. So after talking to several of my students, I realized many had never been to a farm. Many of my students have never really been out of Chatham. And so Joe brought the farm to us.
He put plastic on the floor and he put dirt all over the floor. He put biofish and castings in it. He put it in pots and we put seeds in it.
We have over 140 plants growing. We have bush, what? Bush beans. We have bush beans, tomatoes, lettuce, herbs, and snow peas.
One thing we discovered when Joe came in is that we don't have adequate light. Although we have lots of windows, we don't get enough light to actually care for these plants properly. So we went out into our school community and we asked people if we could borrow some space. And I don't know if you've ever been in an elementary school, but when you ask people for space, you're asking for a lot. But our grade 1 class was more than eager to jump on board, and they developed their own inquiry around the project, and they've added potatoes to the mix. And our grade 7 class has also jumped on board, and so they have several of our plants, and they care for them when we are not able to be in the room and do that. And it's been a wonderful thing as well for the students to be able to partner with their siblings and for them to develop a stronger school community.
I didn't know what the seedling was. I thought it was a snow pea. And I searched it up on Google, and I was absolutely sure that it was a snow pea, and it actually was.
So we've also been working on structures in science. I'm kind of a messy teacher, and I teach a little bit of this and a little bit of that all at the same time, and we don't really compartmentalize our learning. So we've been talking about structures, and we've been building different structures in class. And as our plants grew, we realized that we needed to apply our learning of structures to help our plants out.
We took a bamboo stick and we wrapped the leaves around the bamboo stick, and we noticed that sometimes plants need a little support just like we do.
So along the way, my students fell in love with a campaign called the Inglorious Fruits and Vegetables. Somebody had tweeted us a video earlier in the year, and they loved the idea. And Ugly Fruits and Vegetables recently came to Canada, and it looks at taking fresh fruits and vegetables that normally wouldn't meet grocer standards because it's either misshapen or too small, and it puts it into grocery stores rather than landfills, and it puts it in at a cost of 30% cheaper, so it makes it more accessible to people. And we realize that this is important not just to help our community out with more affordable food, but also to help our environment.
When food rots, it lets off methane gas, and that's what cow farts, and we know that it hurts our environment.
So because the students loved this campaign so much, it seemed like a natural fit to tie into our narrative writing unit, which we're currently on. This was just taken about a week and a half ago, and the students have decided to use their favorite ugly fruits and vegetables as stars in our narrative stories.
We made them out of paper mache, and we used green screen for the setting, and we used shadow puppet for the audio, the text, and the background music.
And then when the videos were done, the students started to tweet them out. So we haven't really done a test. Well, actually, that's a lie. We found a test in the cupboard not long ago, and I said, oh my goodness, it's a test. And they were like, they laughed, and they said, well, we should do that. We should try it. So they wrote a test, and they did great. But I don't administer tests because those don't work for all of my students, but I talk to them and I engage them, and we're out there and we're doing meaningful work. And we know that our work is meaningful because we've gained some recognition lately, which has been pretty incredible for the students. What I love the most is this picture in the top left corner, and this is Eric and his family loved what we were doing, and so they decided to take it a step further and bring it out to our community. And Eric's mom created a Facebook page called Couponing for Outreach for Hunger, where they ask people in Chatham-Kent to go out and to use their coupons to get food and drop them off, and they've made several donations of this size since then. The students also have a reporter that follows them that did a feature on them on Tree Hugger not long ago. They've been on the front page of the paper, and we have an iBook that's been published about the work the students have done. And this is all really wonderful, and it's great to have that recognition. But what matters the most to me is that I see my students coming in every day excited and passionate. They're applying the curriculum that they've learned in so many different areas. They're kind, they're caring, but most importantly, they're recognizing their potential to change their world and to have an impact on their community.
I learned that if you need food, you can go to the food bank, and if you need extra help on learning, you can always ask somebody in your school.
I learned just because you're going through a rough time doesn't mean that you can't help your community.
Thank you very much.